By the end of my presentation, I hope that you have a greater understanding of the roles and expectations of healthcare interpreters. Healthcare interpreters, such as any other interpreters in any other settings, must oblige to the standard rules and regulations found in the Professional Code of Conduct. This includes confidentiality and respect not only for your consumer, but your colleagues as well. Also, which you will find in every aspect of interpreting, it's that you should conduct yourself in a professional manner no matter what setting or where you are. This also includes mastering both signed and oral languages being interpreted. Another aspect of this is collaborating with your colleagues to be able to produce the most effective interpretation. Some things that set medical interpreting apart from other settings of interpreting would be that medical interpreting actually does not have a specialized certification in order to interpret in such settings, such as the EIPA, which stands for Educational Interpreter Performance Assessment, found in the educational setting. However, if you are considering to interpret in a healthcare setting or become a medical interpreter, it is highly suggested that you do obtain some sort of certification, such as the NIC, which stands for National Interpreting Certification, or some other form of credential showing that you are qualified and ready to interpret in such situations. Level of emotional involvement and training yourself to draw professional boundaries is important in medical interpreting especially. I conducted 2 interviews in my research of medical interpreting, and in my first interview, the interpreter informed me about an experience he had with a deaf pregnant client, and he was there from the moment she got the news that she was pregnant up until the delivery and the birth of her first child. Obviously, in this time period, these 9 months, there was a strong bond that was formed between the client and the interpreter. And this is common with healthcare interpreting, that you work with one client for a long period of time. However, it is important to draw professional boundaries and not get yourself too involved, stepping out of your professional character. According to So You Want to Be an Interpreter, medical interpreting can occur in settings such as neighborhood clinics, doctor's appointments, private physician offices, and other various hospital settings. Some skills and components that are vital to the process of medical interpreting is a strong foundation in medical terminology. This is highly important because in medical terminology in general, there are terms that sound very similar, however their meanings are just worlds apart, and you need to know the difference and take the time to learn how to spell the different terms and familiarize yourself with them. I cannot stress enough that working in the medical field, you really need to be professional and have professional conduct at all times. Also, a good skill would be to maintain a high level of self-advocation. Like in any other interpreting setting, you should be able to briefly explain your role as an interpreter and discuss what should be expected by the end of your interpretation or the appointment. Some pros that occurs when you are involved in the medical setting will be that close bond that I discussed earlier. When you create a close bond with a client, that client very much may be a client that you may become reoccurring throughout the rest of your interpreting career. So that's a plus. In my second interview, the medical interpreter informed me that there's a fulfillment, emotional fulfillment that is felt after addressing an interpreting assignment that isn't felt when, for example, interpreting legal or education. So I think that would be a very interesting experience, and I believe that is a pro. Some cons or challenges that may occur in medical interpreting is that because you have that bond I discussed earlier, there's that chance that the deaf client may forget the role of the interpreter as a professional and want to ask direct questions or advice to the interpreter. Whereas you will have to explain to the client, it would be best to direct the questions to the healthcare physician at hand, making it clear that your role is just to interpret and facilitate the communication process, and the ultimate person that should be addressed should be the doctor or whatever healthcare physician is at hand at the moment. Depending on the levels of stress, emotion, intensity of the client's pain or illness being experienced, the client's communication will be affected, and this should be taken highly into consideration. Keep in mind that medical interpreting is a delicate and personal area and should be handled in a professional yet understanding manner. In my second interview I conducted, my interviewee shared with me a situation where the doctor was asking her to wear a procedure mask while in the office. This goes back to my previous point where you have to explain your role, explain briefly and yet effectively that this would obscure the communication process, and find other ways to go around this challenging situation. Whereas she explained in this situation, she was told to wear a surgical shield where it is clear but still covering her face, and she was still able to be visually accessible to her deaf client. If you have any fear of blood or feel uncomfortable in hospitals, then maybe medical interpreting is not exactly the right setting for you. Also, medical interpreting deals with highly stressful situations and highly stressful environments where you may deal with life or death predicaments. And this should be considered. If you are not prepared for this, then also maybe medical interpreting is not the setting for you. Some helpful tips that may help you if you are looking to be a medical interpreter are to attend workshops to improve yourself in medical situations, both ethically and proper execution of terminology. If you are already working in a healthcare setting, then working with your team on your strengths and weaknesses and balancing that out with your team. Another helpful tip would be to familiarize yourself with certain medications, parts of the anatomy, human anatomy, that you would be interpreting in the appointment or assignment. If you know that you are going to interpret, for example, a gynecologist appointment for a woman, then you need to familiarize yourself with common tests and medications and human anatomy parts that would be likely to come up in that situation. Last, I would like to mention, like in any other field of interpreting, other setting, it is important to get involved, go out there and socialize with the deaf community, see how not only deaf individuals converse amongst themselves, but how other interpreters converse with deaf clientele or deaf just out and about, and it'll help you with your expressive skills and receptive skills, and ultimately during your assignments out in the medical office and whatever field you choose to be in or setting you choose to be in. I hope this information helps, and thank you for watching.